Jay was the kind of guy to really look up to a lot of people. He was a very genuine and like kind of like he was very confident in what he did, and the fact that he was a really good surfer even when he was a young child was a gift. You know, he was a natural. He's naturally talented at that. So skateboarding, when we started skateboarding and doing what we wanted to do on waves, on concrete, that's when it started to progress. And Jay was a leader in that area, but he was also a bit of a kid, you know, in the fact that he was slow to change. Like we couldn't get him to wear shoes skateboarding for a long time. He didn't want to wear shoes. He did a lot of things where he would just spontaneously go in a direction but not be able to complete the maneuver. So he wasn't one of the most consistent skateboarders in the world, but he was definitely one of the most experimental and revolutionary. But some of the older guys, like Bob Biniak and Wenzel Rummel, Stacy Peralta, those were the guys that were really beginning to do things that nobody had ever done before. And I just fell into that group of those guys, and we were the ones that were able to start to execute maneuvers that had never been done before, especially in empty swimming pools and stuff.
And actually, you are credited for being the first skater who actually did an aerial. How did that happen? Was it just by chance? Did you see it coming?
It was just spontaneous. It was just about hitting the lip super hard. And when you hit the lip that hard, if you can grab your board, you're going to go into the air. And obviously, harnessing and manipulating gravity is not an easy thing. But I had a technique from surfing that adapted to skateboarding pools. And I was able to learn a technique where I would grab around my knee. And when I grabbed the board, I would pull it out and then, and then let go and like ollie back in, like early release. They say, you know, that people weren't doing ollies and all that stuff back in the 70s. That's bullshit. We used to do ollies all the time. We didn't do them the way that they do them on the street, but we were doing no-handed aerials. Yeah. And you had to, because if you didn't know how to get back into the pool without your hands on the board, like with no hands, you were going to end up in the hospital or seriously injured, like every time you tried to do an aerial. So even though the photographers didn't maybe document that part until sequences came into play, we were doing no-handed aerials and all that shit back in the 70s, way before street skating started doing that stuff. So.
Yeah, and the frontside tuck knee is probably your signature trick. We saw some skaters doing it.
I wouldn't call it a trick. I would basically call it a fundamental part of skateboarding, because to just do an aerial had never been done before. And so for me, what I was doing was establishing a compulsory move. It was compulsory to skateboarding to be able to eventually fly in the air. And whether it was frontside or backside, it was just an aerial. So it became like not so much a trick as an actual move. And as you see, surfers are copying that same style and that same maneuver when it comes to surfing nowadays. They're 40 years late, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they're still doing it. And they're doing airs. And the most stylish way to do any aerial is not between the legs. Between the legs, we call that stink butt, which is considered muy feo. It's ugly. So when you do the tuck knee, that's the most stylish way to do an aerial. And I was fortunate enough to be the first guy that had a photograph taken of me doing that.